The first time I heard about the so-called forgotten network was during a meeting with a former classmate named Marcus, who now worked as a server maintenance technician. We were having a beer, and at a certain point in the conversation, he started talking about orphaned folders, old directories that were not indexed by any search engine or listed on public networks, but that continued to be stored in the dark corners of abandoned servers around the world. He said that some of these folders had been created by people who were already dead or missing, and they remained there, trapped in digital limbo, untouched by anyone. This alone was bizarre, but what he told me next is what really intrigued me. According to him, one of these folders was linked to a project called the Dead Archive of the Forgotten Network, which supposedly stored records of events outside of reality. Things that were never reported but were documented in video, audio, and text as if they were part of another dimension. He couldn't explain it well, just said that things that shouldn't exist were being kept in there. Since I had already been exploring forums and closed environments out of curiosity, this sparked an obsession in me. I asked him for the way, but he refused, saying he wouldn't repeat the mistake of showing it to anyone else. He claimed that after accessing that content, he started having hallucinations and that the network itself seemed to whisper to him to keep coming back. At the time, I thought he was exaggerating. Today, I am sure he wasn't. After much persistence in closed forums and obscure cryptography groups, someone sent me an encoded address. To access it, I had to use an old terminal and emulate a non-standard system, as if I were reviving a computer from the 90s. When I finally managed to get in, I was faced with a cold gray interface and only one folder, ZARC411A, with no icons, descriptions, or modification dates. When I opened it, there were three main files. One was a video, another an audio file, and the third, a text document called Final Record. I clicked on the video first. The footage was completely amateur. It showed a young woman of about 21 entering an underground tunnel in a forest. She was holding a flashlight and seemed to be documenting something for a personal project. The footage had abrupt cuts, as if someone had edited the most important parts. At one point, she finds a rusty metal door with symbols carved into it and opens it with difficulty. On the other side, there was an absurdly long corridor, as if it had no end. She begins to enter, narrating her feeling of being watched, even without seeing anything. The sound starts to fail and the image distorts. The last thing that appears is an extremely tall, thin silhouette with abnormally long arms moving quickly toward the camera. The video cuts out. The audio automatically starts next. It was a continuous whisper, as if hundreds of voices were speaking all at once, but at a low, guttural frequency, hard to understand. But the scariest part was that when I closed the file, the voices didn't stop. I could still hear them, even without headphones, even with the sound off. And it wasn't in my head. I swear the sound was coming from the wall. I opened the last file, the text. It was a diary. The author described a sequence of disappearances occurring in a small town in the countryside, always involving people who had received a black USB drive by mail, with no sender. Everyone who plugged in the device disappeared without a trace. The author of the diary claimed to be one of the survivors, but said he was being pursued by figures that slip out of screens, entities that used electronic devices as portals. At the end of the document, he left a note saying that if anyone was reading it, it was because they had already been marked. I closed everything immediately. I restarted the computer, disconnected from the network, and took a deep breath. But then I noticed a new folder appearing on my desktop. Its name was simply, "You have been accepted." From that point on, my life turned into a nightmare. The folder named "You have been accepted" was empty. That was what scared me the most. I clicked, and nothing appeared. But the strangest thing was that the file couldn't be deleted, moved, or renamed. I tried everything. Antivirus, resetting the system, even formatting the disk. The folder simply remained there, as if it were an extension of the operating system itself. As the days went by, I began to notice small changes in my environment. Minimal things, but they deeply disturbed me. My mirrors would fog up even with the window open. My phone's cameras would turn on by themselves. And 3 times I woke up with dried blood on my fingers, as if I had scratched something or someone during the night. On the 5th day, I woke up to a loud noise coming from the living room. It was my TV turned on by itself, showing a video I had never seen. It was the same girl from the first footage, but now she was in a white room with no doors, repeating a phrase continuously, "We do not belong to the light." She said this while looking directly at the camera, without blinking, with a pale smile that seemed more like pain than joy. In the background, I could hear the same sound from the audio file, the whispers. Those whispers never stopped, not even during the day. At this point, I was only sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night, and I started to lose weight alarmingly. My eyes were always red, and my skin was pale. But what really sealed my ruin was the appearance of a new recording, this time made with my own phone, and I didn't remember recording it. In the video, I was in front of the bathroom mirror, completely still, with black eyes, as if they had been filled with ink. Behind me, a grotesque silhouette, long-limbed with gray, mottled skin and deep-set eyes like craters, was resting its head on my shoulder, but I didn't react. The recording lasted only 7 seconds. And the most terrifying part? The creature disappeared in the reflection, but not in reality. It was behind me only in the reflection, as if the mirror revealed what the human eye could not see. Desperate, I sought Marcus again, but when I went to his old address, I found out he was dead. He had been found inside an elevator, his body completely twisted, as if something had crushed him from the inside out. The police filed it as body collapse of undetermined cause. But there was something even more terrifying. The elevator camera recorded everything. And at the exact moment Marcus entered the elevator, the video shows the lights flickering and the image freezing for 13 seconds. When it returns, he is lying on the floor, unrecognizable. Only for a brief moment is it possible to see a figure standing behind him. The same creature from the reflection. I returned home in a panic. I started burning everything related to the access I had made. Hard drives, routers, even my old laptop. But nothing worked. The folder, "You have been accepted," was now on all my devices, even on my new phone, just out of the box. One night I decided to run away. I took my car and drove to a cabin that belonged to my grandfather in a remote rural area. There was no internet, no cell signal. I thought this would protect me. I was wrong. On the second night, I woke up to knocks outside. 3 knocks, always with the same interval. When I looked out the window, there was no one there. But I saw, etched in the dust on the glass, a phrase written with a dirty finger. "Accept your role." That made no sense, until I saw, in the bathroom mirror of the cabin, something even worse. It was no longer just a silhouette behind me. It was me, but not me as I am now. It was a completely mutilated version of myself. Eyes torn out. The skin of the face ripped like a veil, and the neck opened from side to side. The image was bleeding, literally. Blood was dripping from the frame to the floor. I ran, broke the mirror with a piece of wood, but it returned the next morning, intact, and with the image still there. That's when I realized it wasn't a virus. It wasn't a cursed network. It was a ritual. That folder, the dead archive, was a test, a filter. Those who managed to access the content without losing their sanity were marked, chosen for something much greater. I had been accepted, but had no idea for what. And now, every time I close my eyes, I see faces. Hundreds, thousands of them. Some are dead, others in agony. But all are looking at me and waiting for me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story somehow involved you. But I need to make a special request. Subscribe to the channel. Yes, it's just a click, but it's a click that helps me continue bringing these stories that perhaps no one else would dare to tell. Now tell me, what would you do if a folder like this appeared on your computer? Would you open it? Would you investigate? Or would you throw everything in the fire without looking back? Write in the comments what you would do. But be careful what you wish for, because sometimes desire attracts exactly what you want to avoid. I stayed in the cabin for 3 more days. I no longer ate. Sleeping was impossible. The nightmares had become realities in the form of temporal lapses. I completely lost track of time. One night, I looked in the mirror once more, that same one I had already destroyed, and it was covered in dried blood from the inside. But it wasn't a reflection. It was as if the mirror had an internal layer made of living flesh that was slowly rotting, and the blood was dripping down the sides, as if it were crying suffering. And there, carved in letters made with human nails, was a new phrase: "You are no longer welcome among the living." When I finally left the cabin, dragging myself back to the city, I realized I was being watched. The people on the street, or what seemed to be people, were looking at me in a wrong way. Their faces were too symmetrical. Their eyes never blinked. A man followed me for 3 blocks, and when I confronted him, he simply responded with a frozen smile and a phrase that broke me inside. "We used your body while you were away." What do you mean, while I was away? Away from where? I began to suspect that my body was no longer mine, that perhaps during the blackout moments, some other consciousness inhabited my skin. And each time I returned, it left behind more marks, more scars, and less soul. It was then that I met Clara, or at least the entity that introduced herself as Clara. She appeared at the entrance of my apartment on the 3rd day after my return. She wore a beige coat, her face blurred as if slightly out of focus. "You shouldn't have opened the dead archive," she said, her voice reverberating as if she were speaking from inside a tunnel. I tried to close the door on her, but she was already inside the apartment, as if physical space no longer held validity for that type of presence. Clara explained to me, or tried to explain, what I had done. The deep web, according to her, was just the surface. There was a second level, a sub-network, made of organic codes, that connected directly with entities that do not have a human form, but can manifest through algorithms. The Dead Archive is one of those manifestations, a bridge. And I had crossed that bridge. Those videos, the voices, the mirrors, everything was part of a ritual that went far beyond human understanding. Each person who died after accessing the files was absorbed by this system, not just the soul, but also the digital identity, the habits, the fears. Everything was replicated, transformed into binary language that could be used by the entities to project themselves into our plane. "You are no longer whole," Clara concluded, before disappearing into the shadow of the wall itself. I began to investigate on my own and found other victims. Not many. Some messages scattered across obscure forums, disconnected accounts in lost videos, distorted audios. A woman in Italy had torn out her own eyes after seeing the dead version of herself for too long. A young man in Japan managed to capture the reflection of the creature and printed it in 3D. The resulting object caused fainting in anyone who looked at it for more than 10 seconds. A case in Colombia involved an entire family that had disappeared, and the only clue was a note on the mirror of the house. The mirror lied. Reality is another. Each person who accessed the folder "You have been accepted" became part of the process, and the cycle never ended. It just adapted. I tried to disconnect. I sold my equipment, deleted profiles, destroyed hard drives, but the connection was already in me. A living code. My dreams began to change. I no longer saw faces but mirrors that showed me possible futures. In one of them, I saw myself being consumed by cables that came out of my own belly button. In another, I woke up lying in a bathtub full of wires and the world was just noise and low-resolution images. The network had become my new body. Today, I write this as a final warning, because I know that soon I will no longer be here. And I don't mean death in the traditional sense. I mean replacement. Transformation. Little by little, I feel that something else is gaining space inside me. Sometimes I open my mouth to speak and hear another voice, a voice that is not mine. Sometimes I write words that I don't remember thinking, and worse, I begin to see people, or creatures, that recognize me even though I've never seen them. They wave, they smile, and wait. Maybe you think all of this is an exaggeration, that it's just fiction. A macabre story made to scare you. And maybe it is. But what if it isn't? What if you've seen this folder before? What if you, even without knowing, have also been accepted? If you've made it this far, take a deep breath. Seriously. Because, in a way, you've crossed an invisible line with me. Now I ask you, not as a creator, but as someone trying to maintain sanity, subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you can imagine, and more than I can explain with words. Here, we share stories that are not just to scare, they are to make you think, to stir deep inside, where we keep what we don't tell anyone. And now, tell me, have you ever experienced something that seemed impossible to explain? Something that messed with your mind, that didn't make logical sense, but still left you scared? Share your story with us. Let's create a community that doesn't judge, that welcomes, that listens even to the darkest silences. And if you like this video, tell me, how did it make you feel? Did it scare you? Did it bring back memories? Or did it make you question what is real and what is code? Write it down below. I'm here to read every word.